Hello everyone, welcome back to Creeping It Colorful. We are into Sinister Saturday where Mark reads a story out of the book How They Croaked, and I color a page that I had started before. And this one's out of the Mythographic Shangri-la with Alessandra Fusi as the illustrator. And it's all been based with watercolor pencils. And here is Mark. He's got to put his mic on.
Wolfgang Amadeus, Mozart. Every good boy does fine. Musician and composer, born Salzburg, Austria, January 27, 1756. Died Vienna, Austria, December 5th, 1791, 35 years old. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had a golden ear and magic fingers. As a little kid, he'd hear a piece of music only once and be able to play it back perfectly. People paid through their noses to watch this young genius sit and play the pianoforte before his feet even reached the floor. So, Mozart's father took him on a 4-year concert tour to perform for the likes of Marie Antoinette and King George III, all before little Wolfie was even 10. Mozart plucked billions of notes out of countless instruments with those talented hands, and when he got sick, his fingers were the first to go. The boy wonder supported his family in grand style. They bought fancy clothes and a carriage with 7 horses and moved to a better part of town. His father even charged admission to watch him practice. Mozart performed 24/7, but the gigs dried up when Mozart grew into a gawky teen with a huge head. He still cried easily and always loved a good fart joke, but his cute, money-making prodigy years were definitely over. His father was not amused. Mozart became the concert master of the Salzburg court and taught music to the children of nobility. But the pay was low. He moved to Vienna in his 20s, but Emperor Joseph didn't hire him. Mozart made money writing dance songs for the balls at court, but he really wanted to write sonatas, symphonies, and other important music you had to listen to while sitting in a chair. Unfortunately, that kind of music wouldn't pay for his fancy lifestyle. Mozart worked hard and wrote everything fast, without any cross-outs or first drafts. His famous operas, The Magic Flute, The Marriage of Figaro, and Don Giovanni, to name a few. But he also partied hard, primped, and shopped till he dropped. Mozart married Constantine Weber. She came from a musical family, and she knew a man with rhythm when she saw one. They had 6 children, but only 2 survived to adulthood. When things got tough, he sold his wife's silver and jewels to make some cash. Mozart could keep a beat, but his forward-thinking innovation music was out of sync with his own times, so he ended up a starving artist. Throughout his life, he would get a sore throat, and then his shoulders, hips, knees, and finger joints swelled up and hurt so badly he couldn't move. Nobody knew what it was. Blood-sucking slugs called leeches were used to suck out the so-called bad blood from his joints, which is what doctors of the time believed caused illness. The sore joint was shaved and pricked. The leech was kept in a cup until it latched onto the knee or the elbow, and several hours later, after the leech was full of blood, it fell off. One day, an unknown messenger came with a request for Mozart to write a requiem death song for a person whose identity the messenger didn't wish to disclose. The pay was good, so Mozart jumped at the commission. While Mozart worked on the Requiem, he grew weaker and weaker. He began to get the creepy feeling he was writing the Requiem for himself. When Mozart's skin erupted in red pustules, he said, "I'm being poisoned to death." The doctor's diagnosis was severe military fever, which was a catch-all phrase for everything is falling apart. It was said to be caused by excessive passions and eating too many plums and cucumbers. Doctors smeared concoctions of warm turpentine, wax, powdered Spanish flies, and mustard on his body, which made his skin bubble up and blister. Not a pretty picture. Mozart's hands swelled up. His music-making fingers turned into 10 overstuffed sausages. That's when Mozart got into bed. Soon, he began to vomit. His fever spiked and his rash got worse. His whole body ballooned and he was unable to even sit up. He was slumped over in bed and his crippled fingers were too puffed up even to hold a pen. But he hummed and tapped out the Requiem while the musical assistant wrote down the notes for him. The stink of rotting human filled the apartment. When Mozart said, "I can taste death in my mouth," someone ran to get the priest, but Mozart never wrote that much church music, so the priest wouldn't come over. They searched for the doctor and eventually found him at the theater, but he wouldn't leave until the performance was over. He knew Mozart could croak any minute, and he didn't want to be there when it happened. He did not want to be known as the doctor who failed to save one of the most brilliant human beings of all time. That could really kill a medical career. After taking the long way, the doctor finally arrived. He put a cold water and vinegar compress on Mozart's forehead. Mozart shivered, then vomited across the room. 2 hours later, he was dead. Mozart was right in a way. He was writing the Requiem for himself. Constantine jumped into Mozart's bed to catch what he had so she could die with him. And it didn't work. He had been sick for only 15 days. Even in death, he was quick. Mozart's final illness had started with a streptococcal strep infection in his throat, and that migrated into his blood and joints, ultimately leading to kidney failure. He didn't finish the Requiem, and he didn't get to finish life as an old man either. Mozart died December 5th, 1791 in Vienna, Austria. He was only 35 years old. They didn't do an autopsy because his corpse was too smelly. The skin was soft and squishy, not stiff like that of a normal dead person. After a small gathering at a cathedral, a horse and cart picked up Mozart's coffin and clopped 3 miles to St. Mary's Cemetery. Nobody went with it because attending the burial wasn't the custom of the time. Mozart's body was taken out of the reusable coffin, sewn into a body bag, and covered with quicklime to make it decompose faster. He was buried that night or the next morning, depending on when the 5 or 6 other unlucky stiffs were on hand to fill up the common grave alongside Mozart. There was no headstone marking the grave because the emperor forbade them, and that was that. Unless you were royalty or super rich, the law required sack burials as they were cheaper and cleaner, so most people were buried this way. Constantine didn't go to Mozart's grave for 17 years. Again, people didn't do that back then. When she eventually went there, she couldn't find the grave because the person who buried Mozart was dead. And anyway, every 7 years, the decomposed bodies in common graves were cleaned out and raked over to prepare for new and more burials. Today's strep throat can be cured by taking antibiotics. Unfortunately, Mozart died 140 years before antibiotics were invented. Few footnotes. Leeching. A leech is a blood-sucking worm. Leeching is the practice of using leeches to get so-called bad blood out of the body. Steps for successful leeching. Don't use sick leeches. 2. Soak leeches in beer. 3. Smear blood where you want them to take hold. 4. Put leech in a cup and invert onto the skin. 5. Don't let leeches wander off. 6. Let leech drop off when it wants. If you pull it off, its jaw may get stuck in the skin, which will get infected and bleed profusely. 7. Never use on face or neck because they leave disfiguring scars. You'll end up with a discolored eyelid for life if a leech sucks on it. Recommended dose, 15 to 20 leeches per adult. 3 to 6 for kids ages 5 and under. 1 per infant, and even that may kill the baby. Skull and crossbones footnote says sometimes unstoppable bleeding follows a leech bite. This is especially dangerous in children and infants. Out with the garbage. Mozart's widow, Constantine, threw away many of Mozart's unfinished musical compositions. Beethoven's secretary threw out 260 of the 400 conversation books Beethoven wrote to communicate with people. George and Martha Washington threw away all their love letters to each other. Christopher Columbus' family sold off all his maps and charts. The end.
There we go. All right. Very interesting. It seems like they had their own way of recycling when it came to bodies, right? Even with coffins or boxes or whatever they put them in, they didn't keep them in. You just got put in a sack and buried. Fun. And then, I guess they did them in piles. I couldn't kind of remember what the heck was going on with the burial. But
after a while, they clean them out of the barrels and rake them over into the dirt and then reuse the barrels.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you heard Mark. Mark said how they would rake over the bodies and reuse the areas that they were buried in. It's just, well, I guess we returned to the earth one way or another, and they figured why not just help with the process. So that's what they done did.
And they said they didn't mourn. It wasn't
and you
didn't
didn't and you didn't mourn the deaths, and you didn't go to the burial, and you didn't visit, and so you were just put in a sack, buried, and removed when you became fertilizer and moved over for the next one in line. And how do you like the leech theories too? My goodness, just makes you want to go into the Amazon and jump in some water and get leached. But yeah, those are just some weird facts about Mozart. I didn't even know half of that stuff. I didn't realize he was, you just take some famous people for granted as to how their demise was, or their time frame that they lived in, and their practices back then when it came time for them to pass. So I wonder at what point, oh yeah, okay, what really bothered me was the doctor. Okay, so the doctor's in the movie theater, right? And he's not leaving because he wants to watch the movie, but only because he doesn't want to be there when he dies and be looked at as the doctor who let him die. Buddy, if you're not going to go there, before he dies, and you would rather watch a movie, I think you're going to get that stigma anyway. So that didn't make any sense to me. Being worried about how people looked at you. Well, you should have been there to figure out what was wrong with him and stop it before it got too far. And obviously you didn't really care. You'd rather go watch a movie, eat some popcorn. Well, I guess that's their mentality back then. And if they didn't like a person, well, you were kind of doomed. Look at the priest that wouldn't come, I guess, to do the last rites because Mozart didn't do organ music or religious music. Now, what kind of a religious person is that? How religious can you be and not care about someone just because they didn't make music for religious music? I mean, that makes no sense either. So they all had their ideas and their excuses, more or less. So I just can't believe how people got treated. But I bet if they were in line for his money, they would have been right there at the door, knocking the door down, saying, "Sure, I'll help." There are quite a few people like that in the world nowadays, too. They're there for the money, but they're not there to help. They're in the shadows, so to speak. And they feel like if they don't get paid, then they're not gonna do what they should be doing out of being a caring person. A lot of that's lost anymore. It's pretty bad when you have to remind people to do a random act of kindness, you know? The whole point of a random act of kindness is do it without thinking. You know, and it's not do it because you're being reminded of it. Oh yeah, I guess I should have held that door open. It's just a strange world we live in. A lot of people are ass backwards, or ass backwards, whatever you want to call it, in their train of thought. And you know, you can get frustrated with things and still be empathetic toward other people, because there's always somebody out there who's getting it worse than you are, maybe not at the exact same time, maybe not in the exact same way or whatever, but they're in a different situation than you are. Look at all those people who are homeless and had to tolerate this nasty winter we had. Snow, freezing rain, ice, while we're inside thinking, man, I'm so mad because my heater broke. Well, how do you think they feel? They never had a heater. They're out there trying to survive. And some of those people may not have had family members to help them either. So you always got to worry, or always got to think someone is worse off than you somewhere, no matter the situation. And as frustrated as you get, as upset as you get, it's just the way it is. I mean, you could be worse off than someone else and put them into perspective too, even though you don't want to be a example to set an example, but that's just how things are and how things should be looked at. You should always think about how there's other people worse off than you. Sometimes it doesn't even pay to complain, because it can fall on deaf ears, and then you're just complaining for nothing and getting yourself all stressed out over everything, making your health worse. So do what you can when you can, however you can with what you got. And just try to trudge through. And more positivity than negativity helps also. Try to think of what could be, and maybe you'll make it happen. Maybe you'll manifest it. Sometimes I get in those situations, and then I think about it, and then I try to think of a solution. The only time I get really jacked up about something really bothering me is when I've thought about it, and I just can't find a solution, and that's when things go sideways for me. But sometimes I think too much too. Sometimes the thinking can get you in trouble. But you don't want to be the negative Nancy or a Karen that always complains, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes you think that you need to vent, and then you come across looking like a negative Nancy or a Karen, but just sometimes you just need to get it out. You get it out. Get it out, get it over with. Even if you have to talk to your cats or your dogs and say, Jesus mighty, what the heck's going on? Why am I getting the shit end of the what is it, short end of the stick? Well, mine's the shit end of the stick. And they look at you like you're a lunatic. But then at least you got it off your chest. Alright, so we got that much of that dragon done. I'm going to try to get the rest of the body done, at least of the dragon. I was using a blending pencil up here. I'm using Prismacolors. And I was kind of running out of color schemes for dragons. And like I said in the last one, I don't know if I did this one the last Sinister Saturday where I did the basing of it. But I used a color that wasn't really black, but it was a black with some, like a shade of pink in it. So I'm going to use the black to go around the scales at least to make them jet out. But I just saw that I don't have a pencil out for the coloring the body. So I'm just going to go around the scales to make them stand out. And then once I have the other color on here, I'm going to do the edges all around the outside. And then the inside part, well actually I'm going to do it darker around the outside with the same color. The inside part I'm going to do a little lighter, and then once I am done with that, I'm going to go over it with a white Prismacolor to give it some light reflection. Sort of like I have it here now. That sort of gives me a little bit of a guideline when I did it with the watercolor pencils. And everybody has their own way of coloring. And man, I am dragoned out this month. I think this one here, when I get it done, will be number 30. I'm like, holy crap, I didn't even know I had that many dragons. But just to be fair, some of my dragons had more than one head. So I was counting, there was one with 3 heads and one with 7 heads. So right there's 10. So that I had counted against the 30 total. But then I have 2 double spreads in the Kirby Rosanna's books. The one I really is one of my favorite. I did it rainbow, and I really want to get that one done this weekend, but I don't know if I will. I'll be at a craft fair tomorrow, and so, or a craft show, and so maybe I'll take that one with me tomorrow and color it my one mythographic book is falling apart. So I decided to spiral bound that one on my own. So I've got that project going. I was thinking of doing a video on that to show you next week how I do that part. Well, I did it with a partial Kirby Rosanna's book. And I do a lot of thrifting and stuff, and if I see a spiral bound book that I know I can repurpose the spiral, even if it's a planner, and you can't really reuse the planner because the dates and everything, well, I'll reuse the whole thing by either covering the pages or just using the spiral and making it another book out of it. Is there a cat behind me? Yeah, I thought I felt a cat behind me, sitting in my chair, trying to push me off my chair. I feel a pussycat paw back there. Anyway, so I'm thinking of doing that. If you think you'd like to see how I do that it's because I did junk journaling and I repurposed some books. And I like to use the spiral bound because it was so much easier when you opened it up and the pages to journal on. You were laying it flat, so it was a lot better to use it that way. And so a lot of the ones that I was commissioned to do, I used a spiral bound book and repurposed it. And it was easier because you can make them as thick as you wanted and everything, and it was still flat enough for the people to easy for the people to write on. And once I get this done here, my plan is to, after I do these scales, these 50 million scales that this stinking dragon has, I'm going to do the other coloring like I said. And the outside's dark, inside lighter, and then top off with a white Prismacolor. But then I'm going to go over it and burnish it all with a blender, and then I'm going to redo the scales with a black glitter gel pen to make them stand out. So I would normally just color under these, but because I don't want to do it totally everything black, and I'm using a different shade of black, I'm just going to outline the scales and bore the crap out of you. How's that? How's that for a video? I got some other stuff I have to do yet for the sale tomorrow, so I just wanted to squeeze this one in while I could, because we were pretty busy today. We went to a library book sale, scored some good items. I got a few ghost books from my other channel, so that's going to be interesting. Some of those books are really interesting. Some of them were like kids ghost stories that were true, of haunted kids. And then I know there was one about Amish in the Amish heartland, some true ghost stories, scariest places on earth, different things like that. But I scored some coloring books. And I'll have to show, maybe I'll do a short or a video on that, because the one book is really weird, but it was fill a bag for $5 day. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to plunk it in the bag because it's unusual and I've never seen it. And so I'm all up for something new and different, but I'm kind of wondering if I made a bad choice or not. But if I do a video, you can tell me in the comments either I was crazy or a smart move. Either way, I might do a little video to show what I got. I have not found a lot of adult coloring books at library sales, so I didn't even know which section to look at. But I found them, and it was strange. It's a very strange book, and you'll agree with me when you see it, because I'm pretty sure nobody else, and if somebody else has it, I'll be shocked, because it is a very strange book. So now that I've got you curious, you're gonna have to check that video out when I do it, which will probably be maybe Tuesday. We'll see. Or maybe I'll plunk one out Monday, so you guys can comment and see what I mean. Oh my goodness, this is like, what the heck? It's like he has a disease with all these freaking scales. I also have an app called Freebie Alerts, and it'll pop up when someone posts stuff that they're just giving away, and it's local. And I think it was this morning, or no, yesterday, one came up and they had a box full of stuff, and I couldn't really see in the picture what it was, but I stopped over there and they had coloring books in there, but they were, like kids coloring books. And I actually had one that says How to Train Your Dragon. That was one of the coloring books. Some Mickey Mouse coloring books were in there. There was a I think it was Star Wars, I'm not sure, was in there. And a Batman one was in there. There are different ones. I just grabbed them all up. Okay, so I've got his scales done, and so we'll see how this puppy turns out. I'll be posting the finished masterpiece in just a post instead of, and then for the hashtag March of the Dragons. And then I'm sorry to say, Vera, I'm going to be tagging you again. You're going to get really sick of my tags. But anywho, I'm glad you guys stopped by. Hope you were got a little bit of interest in that strange Mozart story, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. I shall see you next week if I don't see you tomorrow. And stay happy, stay healthy, stay creative, stay creepy, and stay tuned for the next video. I shall see you then. Bye-bye for now.